In the winter of 1827, in a cheap lodging house in Edinburgh, an old man dies in his bed. His name is Donald. He's an army pensioner, the kind of man nobody notices and nobody misses. He dies quietly, of natural causes, in a rented room, and he dies owing his landlord £4. £4, a small debt, the sort of thing that dies with the man. But the landlord, a rough Irish laborer named William Hare, isn't the kind to let £4 go into the ground. And as he stands there looking at the dead body of a man who owes him money, an idea starts to move behind his eyes. The parish has sent a plain coffin to bury the old soldier for free. Hare goes and finds his friend, another Irish laborer from just down the street, a short, sharp-eyed man named William Burke. Together, that night, the two of them pry the lid off the coffin. They lift the old man's body out. They fill the empty coffin back up with bark from the tannery down the lane, dead weight to match a dead man, and they nail it shut. The parish buries a box of tree bark the next day, and nobody ever knows, because the body of Donald the pensioner is going somewhere else. It's going across the city, in the dark, to the back door of a man who pays cash with no questions asked for a fresh human corpse. That night, two men with no money and no prospects discover there is a fortune to be made from the dead. And to keep making it, they will kill 16 people. It started with a £4 debt. It ended with one of their own bodies laid open on a slab and a book bound in his skin that you can still go and look at today. This is how. To understand the murders, you have to understand the buyer. Because none of this happens anywhere but Edinburgh, in exactly these years. In the 1820s, Edinburgh is one of the greatest centers of medicine on the face of the earth. Students come from across Europe and America to learn surgery here. And to learn surgery, you need one thing above all else: bodies. To learn how to cut a living person and not kill them, you first have to cut a great many dead ones. The most famous anatomist in the city is a brilliant, arrogant lecturer named Dr. Knox. His classes are the hottest ticket in Edinburgh. Over 500 students packed in to watch him work, 3 hours a day. And every one of those students is paying to see real human anatomy on real human dead. But here's the trap the whole city is caught in. The law says you are only allowed to dissect a very narrow supply of bodies: executed criminals, the odd suicide, orphans who die with no one to claim them. That's essentially it. And there simply aren't enough. As the medical schools boom, the hangman is sending fewer and fewer men to the gallows. The demand explodes. The legal supply dries up to a trickle. And whenever the law forbids something that people desperately want, the same thing always happens. A black market appears. So Edinburgh grows a secret trade. Men called resurrectionists, grave robbers. They wait for a fresh burial, and in the dead of night they dig the body back up, and they sell it to the anatomy schools for cash. It becomes so common that the living start guarding the dead. Families take shifts sitting in graveyards. They build watchtowers to look out over the tombs. They lock their dead inside iron cages called mort safes. You can still see them in Scottish churchyards. Heavy iron bars, bolted over a grave, for one purpose: to stop someone stealing the body inside. And the reason people go to all that trouble is simple: money. A fresh corpse in Edinburgh sells for somewhere around £8 to £10. Let me put that number in your hand. A live-in servant in this era might earn £10 for an entire year of work, so a single fresh body could be worth almost as much as a year of a working person's life. Overnight, in cash. That is the world Burke and Hare have just stumbled into. They sell poor dead Donald to Dr. Knox's assistants, and they are paid £7 and 10 shillings for one night's work, more money than either man has ever held at once. And as they split the cash, one of Knox's men says something that changes everything. He tells them they'd be glad to see them again, whenever they have another body to sell. Quick pause for a few seconds, because you're going to want to see how this ends. So guys, this channel is closing in on 500 subscribers, and you can push it over the line right now. Please like, hit subscribe, and you'll be right here for the next one. That's it. Back to Edinburgh. Because Burke and Hare have just been handed a business. There's only one problem with it. People don't die on schedule, so they stop waiting for them to. Early in 1828, another of Hare's lodgers falls ill. A miller, staying in the house, sick with a fever. He might recover. He might not. And Burke and Hare look at a sick man in a bed, and they no longer see a sick man. They see £7 lying there. That might get up and walk away if he gets better. So they make sure he doesn't. They give him whiskey until he's senseless, and then one of them lies down across his chest, pinning him, crushing the breath out of him, while the other clamps his hands over the man's nose and mouth. No wound, no blood, no struggle anyone can hear, just a heavy weight, and a hand, and a few minutes. It's a horribly clever way to kill. Because a body with no marks on it looks like a body that simply died. Smothered like this, a victim looks for all the world like just another poor soul who drank too much and never woke up, which in this city is the most ordinary death there is. When it reaches the dissecting table, there is nothing to see, nothing to explain, nothing to investigate. This method, suffocating someone to leave a clean, saleable corpse, will eventually get its own name, taken from one of these two men, to burk someone. It enters the English language and it never leaves. They carry the miller's body to Knox. They're paid. No one asks how a sick lodger became a dead one. And that silence, the total, profitable silence of it, is the permission they've been waiting for. Now they know. They don't need the sick, or the dying, or the already dead. They can make a corpse out of anyone the city won't miss. And a port city like Edinburgh is full of people the city won't miss. What follows, across 1828, is a killing spree run like a business. The exact order is uncertain. Most of what we know comes from Burke's own confessions later, and even he contradicts himself on who came when. But the pattern is always the same. They pick the people at the very bottom, the ones with no family close by, no fixed address, no one to raise the alarm. Beggars, drunks, strangers passing through, the old, the sick, the lost. They lure them into the house with the promise of a drink and a warm place to sit. They get them drunk. And then, when the moment comes, one sits on the chest and the other seals the mouth, and another human being becomes another payment. Some of them we know by name. There's an old woman named Abigail Simpson who sold salt in the streets. They got her drunk over 2 days and killed her, and Knox's man remarked how fresh the body was. There's a young woman named Mary Patterson, beautiful by every account. When her body was delivered to Knox's rooms, some of the young medical students recognized her because they had known her, alive, in the city, and it said Knox kept her corpse preserved in whiskey for 3 months because she was so striking before he let anyone dissect her. And there's the one that finally cracks the city's conscience, a young man named James Wilson. Everyone in Edinburgh knows him. They call him Daft Jamie. He's about 18, with a limp and a simple, gentle mind, and he wanders the streets and everyone knows his face. He fights them, hard. It takes both of them to kill him. And when Jamie's body is laid out on the dissection table, the students recognize him instantly. This isn't an anonymous stranger. This is a boy half the city knew by name. Knox denies it's him. And then, this part is documented, the head and the feet, the parts that made Jamie unmistakable, are removed first, cut away before too many people can look too closely. That's the moment the ground shifts, because you cannot keep murdering a city's invisible people forever. Eventually, you kill someone who is seen. And their very last victim is going to be seen by exactly the wrong people. The last day of October, 1828. Halloween. Burke brings an old Irish woman named Margaret Docherty back to the house on the excuse that they might be related, that her mother had the same name as his. It's a lure like all the others. That night, they kill her. But this time, the house isn't empty. There are other lodgers staying there. A couple named James and Anne Gray. And the next morning, something is off. Burke is behaving strangely. He becomes oddly, fiercely insistent that Anne Gray stay away from one particular bed, with a pile of straw at the foot of it. Which, of course, is the one place she now needs to look. When the Grays get their chance, they go to the straw, and they pull it back. And there, crammed underneath, is the body of Margaret Docherty. Blood at her mouth. Very freshly, very obviously dead. Helen McDougall, Burke's partner, tries to buy their silence on the spot. She offers the Grays £10 a week to say nothing. £10 a week, to a poor couple, is a staggering sum, a fortune to just look away. They say no, and they walk straight out to find the police. But by the time the police arrive, Burke and Hare have already moved the body out, carried it off to Knox's rooms, where it's meant to disappear like all the others. Except this time there's a witness who saw it, and a name and a trail. The police follow it to Knox's dissecting room, and there they find Margaret Docherty's body, and James Gray identifies her on the spot. After nearly a year and 16 bodies, it all comes apart in a single day, because two ordinary lodgers looked under the straw and refused the money. Burke and Hare are arrested, so are their two women. And now the authorities have a serious problem. They are almost certain these people are murderers, but being certain is not the same as being able to prove it. Every other body is gone, dissected, destroyed, scattered. The one corpse they have can't clearly prove murder because that was always the entire point of the method. It leaves nothing to find, and each of the four can simply blame the others. So the prosecution makes a cold, ugly, calculated decision. To convict one of these men, they will let another one walk. They go to William Hare, and they offer him a deal. Confess, testify against your friend, give us Burke, and you go free. Completely free. No charges at all. Hare takes it without hesitation. The man who lay across the chests and sealed the mouths, right beside Burke, for every one of those killings, he informs on his partner to save his own neck. And it works. The trial opens on Christmas Eve, 1828. It runs straight through the night, and on Christmas morning, the verdict comes back. William Burke, guilty. Sentenced to hang. His partner Helen McDougall gets a strange, uniquely Scottish verdict. Not proven. It's a third option their courts allow. Somewhere between guilty and innocent. It doesn't say she didn't do it. It says the Crown couldn't prove she did. She walks out under a cloud that never lifts. And William Hare, who confessed, in his own words, to helping murder 16 people, walks out of that courtroom a free man. He vanishes from history and is never punished for any of it. To this day, no one knows for certain where or how he died. The city is incandescent. They wanted both men to swing. Instead, they only get to watch one. But that one, they are going to make count. There is one more person the crowd wants, and it isn't even Burke, it's the doctor. Robert Knox is never charged. He's never even called as a witness. He buys a dozen fresh bodies in under a year and apparently never once asks the two laborers at his back door where a steady supply of the freshly dead is coming from. Whether Knox truly didn't know or simply didn't let himself ask is a question historians still argue over. And the honest answer is that we don't know for certain what was in his head. What we do know is what the public believed. To them, he was as guilty as the men who did the smothering. A mob hangs an effigy of him outside his home and tears it apart. His reputation in the end never recovers, and years later he leaves Edinburgh a broken figure. The buyer who made the whole trade profitable never spends a day in a cell. So all of the city's fury and all of its appetite for justice comes down on the one man they're actually allowed to have, William Burke. On the 28th of January, 1829, Burke is hanged in the center of Edinburgh, and the crowd that turns out to watch is enormous, around 25,000 people. They rent out windows overlooking the gallows. They jam every street and rooftop with a view. When he drops, they roar. And then the court hands down the final perfect piece of it. The punishment aimed precisely at the crime. Burke sold bodies to the anatomists. So Burke's sentence is that his own body will be given to the anatomists. He is to be publicly dissected, cut open in front of an audience, exactly like the corpses he delivered to Knox's door. The dissection happens 2 days later, at the university, and so many people fight to get in that it nearly turns into a riot. Students storming the doors until it's agreed the public can file past the body in batches of 50 at a time. The man who spent a year turning people into anatomical specimens ends the same way, on the slab, on display. There's a story that during that dissection, the professor dipped his pen into Burke's blood and used it to write out a note. That exact detail is traditional, passed down as much as proven, but the note itself is real. It sits in the University of Edinburgh's collection to this day, said to be written in the blood of William Burke. And that is not the last of him you can see. Walk into the University of Edinburgh's Anatomical Museum today, and William Burke is still there, his complete skeleton kept and displayed since 1829, nearly 2 centuries later. The man was never allowed to be buried at all. He is still, in a sense, serving his sentence. But there is one more object, and it's the one that gets under your skin, because of what it is. After the dissection, pieces of Burke's tanned skin were made into grim little souvenirs, and one of them survives. on display in Surgeons' Hall in Edinburgh. It's a small pocketbook, a wallet, and stamped across the front of it in plain gold letters are the words, Burke's Skin Pocketbook. On the back, executed 28th of January, 1829. A wallet, made from the skin of a murderer, labeled with the date they hanged him. You can go and stand in front of it. Now, the museum itself is careful with its words, and so am I. It's displayed as, and has long been believed to be, bound in Burke's own skin. It has never actually been scientifically tested to confirm it's human, so it lives in that strange space, an object the whole city accepted as a piece of the killer himself, sitting in a glass case, unproven and undeniable at the same time. 16 people were turned into merchandise so that 2 men could get paid. And in the end, the one who hanged for it was turned into merchandise too. A skeleton on a stand, a note in his own blood, a wallet with his name on it. So how did 16 murders grow out of one 4-pound debt? They grew out of a gap between what the law allowed and what people were willing to pay for. The medical schools needed bodies. The law only permitted a trickle. And into that empty space between supply and demand rushed grave robbers. And then, at the very bottom, 2 men who worked out that the freshest, easiest body of all is one you make yourself. The debt was only the spark. The real engine was money, a corpse worth a year's wages, and a buyer who wouldn't ask. But the story has one last turn, and it's the part that actually matters. The horror of Burke and Hare did something the endless grave robbing never had. It frightened the country into changing the law. A few years later, in 1832, Parliament passed the Anatomy Act, and it opened up a proper legal supply of bodies to the medical schools so that no one would ever again have a financial reason to rob a grave or dig a body out of the straw or press a hand over a stranger's mouth for 8 pounds. The market that created Burke and Hare was shut down deliberately so that there could never be another pair like them. They killed 16 people for money, and the thing that finally stopped them wasn't the rope or even the mob. It was a law that made dead bodies worthless to men like them. Written, in the end, by the 16 who never got a name in the ledger. Up the close and down the stair, the old Edinburgh rhyme still goes. Burke's the butcher, Hare's the thief, and Knox, the man who bought the beef. 2 of them got away with it. The one who didn't is still on that shelf.